What would Outkast's Hey Ya sound like if we used a system of 31 notes per octave instead of 12? And what if we slowed it down by like 50%? Plus reverb? Anyone? I teamed up with fellow musician and friend of the channel, Mel Presson, in order to figure that out. The process was enlightening. It's not every day that you're afforded the opportunity to bend the fabric of Western tonal harmony in order to take a familiar song and reimagine it within an entirely different musical system. So today I'd like to take you behind the scenes and show you exactly how this arrangement came to life. It's time to get microtonal. All right, so first things first, we're in the key of G major, which is interesting because each phrase of this tune ends on this E major chord. At first, I thought this had to be some sort of mistake in the chord chart. The sixth chord in the key of G major should be E minor, not E major. But after a quick listen to the original track and a mildly paranoid double check of the official music video, I confirmed two things. One, I'm not losing my mind. It really is E major. And two, Ultimate Guitar actually got it right for once. Sometimes two unlikely things can happen at the same time. Go figure. This E major chord is fascinating, particularly in the context of the chorus where it's juxtaposed by a synth line clearly outlining an E minor kind of sound. E minor and E major clash. The presence of both the minor and major third are spicy, to say the least, especially when they're voiced close like this on a similar timbre. But Hey Ya kind of gets away with it because one, the tonalities are distributed across different instruments which cover entirely different frequency ranges. And two, the synth line goes by so quickly that you'll likely just hear this minor third as a kind of chromatic passing tone and not a mainstay chord tone. If I had to guess, I'd probably say that this chordal anomaly is just a natural byproduct of working with loops and DAWs. Andre 3000 probably was not considering the unimpeachable rules and regulations of Western tonal harmony when he worked out this beat, and honestly, we're probably better off for it because it's a nice, quirky sound. But it got me thinking. Half of the musical elements here pull us up perceptually towards an E major kind of sound, where the other half pull us down towards an implied E minor. What if we split the difference? And this little idea became the basis for our entire arrangement.
I don't know. Okay, I can do it.
Yeah, try it right now. Just like
Okay.
Because they don't know how.
Sticking two together, cause they don't know how.
So it starts on the lower note. Don't know how.
Don't know how.
Yeah. With 31 notes per octave, you get access to a whole new set of harmonies that simply don't exist in 12-tone equal temperament. So I'll start you from this C half-flat neutral chord, okay?
Okay. Sounds great. I know exactly where that.
One of the most interesting is the neutral chord, a tonality which sits in between major and minor. Neither one nor the other. We're trying to get to the notes in between the notes here. I'm basically asking you to do something wrong, so it's gonna feel weird. It's gonna feel weird, but it's gonna be okay. Here's how you build it. Let's start with our root, E. Move up a neutral third and add G half sharp. Finally, add your fifth, B. And there you have it, E neutral. In Ito step notation, that gives us 0, 9, 18. You'll notice that two neutral thirds stack neatly to a perfect fifth, creating a symmetrical structure. This makes the neutral third a natural way to bridge the gap and split the difference between our E major and implied E minor chord, blending both tonalities into something that for a lot of ears out there will sound entirely new. Granted, by itself, it may sound just a little bit out of place, but don't worry, I'm gonna show you how we fix that by preparing this chord progression with some neutral voice leading techniques to kind of smooth it over and get it sounding more functional within the context of Hey Ya.
Cause we don't know how. That it?
Yes! That was it! That was it!
That was the best one, I think, so far.
Here's the progression one more time.
My baby don't mess around because she loves me so, and this I know for sure.
This E neutral here may have solved the problem of having two incompatible chords in the same place at the same time, but it actually throws a different tuning wrench into our arrangement. The G half sharp in our neutral chord is now mismatched with the G natural in both our 1 and 4 chord. This might sound a bit disjunctive to your average listener. We could alter the G natural in our first two chords to match the outlier G half sharp, so we'd be left with the chords G half sharp neutral half flat 5, C major half sharp 5, D major, and E neutral.
My baby don't mess around because she loves me so, and this I know for sure.
Approaching it like this is totally valid, but it kind of leans towards the more xenharmonic side of the microtonal coin, and we want it to be a little bit more subtle with this arrangement. In our original chord progression, we hung on the 4 chord C major for 2 bars before this deceptive cadence took us to our 6 chord. So we thought, why not introduce some micro movement into this 2-bar repetition? See, half sharp neutral 7 here could serve to do a couple things. It would better anticipate our neutral 6 chord, giving our ears the hint of this neutral flavor to come without diving straight into it. If we also expanded our C chord to include its major 7th, the shift also becomes way less jarring because this new chord now shares 2 common tones with the chord before it, E and B. Furthermore, the new half-sharp notes will smoothly lead us like a ladder into our D major chord.
My baby don't mess around because she loves me so, and this I know for sure.
As you can imagine, well-thought-out voice leading can be an absolute lifesaver in smoothing over a microtonal progression. This subtle movement really helps glue the entire progression together in a way that feels intentional. I see a lot of people get stuck on these kinds of things early on into their microtonal explorations, and it totally makes sense. It can be very difficult to integrate what you already know in 12 with all of these new extra notes. Heck, it's why Alois Haba invented the idea of field shifting. Field shifting is a useful compositional framework mostly used in 24 Edo, popularized by the Czech composer Alois Haba. It's a way of working with 24 notes per octave as 2 separate sets of 12 that are displaced by a quarter tone. So you'll have 2 separate circles of fifths that exist as 2 different fields overlaid on top of each other. The idea is that you can do whatever you want in each field, but it's ill-advised to ever cross fields. You can go from a quarter tone chord to a prime chord, for example, shift from one field to the other, one keyboard or the other, but you shouldn't ever take a note from the quarter tone field and combine it with a note from the prime field. Now, obviously, there are no actual rules. Feel free to do whatever you want. In this video alone, we're going to be crossing fields like no one's business, but I think field shifting can be useful to people getting into 24 for the first time. Its existence, though, I think demonstrates an unfortunate but true fact for a lot of new-to-you tuning systems, which is that this stuff can be kind of difficult to make work at first. But guess what? You don't need to use all of these new notes that you have at once. In fact, I'd strongly recommend that you don't. It can be way too overwhelming at first. Instead, focus on something simple, a 2-note dyad that you like. The motion from one object to another. A harmonic relation that catches your ear in an inspiring way. Maybe something as simple as this neutral voice leading structure. For me, 31 has always felt emergent. At the heart of all of my music is something that is dead simple, because I think that from simplicity comes complexity, which brings me to part 2. Heptatonic Mohajira. Now that we've established our microtonal chord progression, let's find a scale we can use as a vehicle to move around this tune. Remember that the neutral chord is built by stacking neutral thirds. If we were to build a scale from this neutral third structure, we might end up with Heptatonic Mohajira, or Mohajira 7. This is a 7-note subset built by splitting our neutral third into a consecutive chain of major seconds and neutral seconds. In 31, we can generate this by stacking alternate diasis step patterns of 5 and 4 until we reach the octave. This temperament feels very neutral, but it also feels very functional, so using it as a scale perfectly complements our altered progression. For this arrangement in particular, we decided to go with Heptatonic Mohajira's 7th mode. To introduce counter melodies, ear candy, and neutral Mohajira chords into the mix. When it came to physically recording all of these ideas, I used what I like to call the scrapbooking method. Since most of my instruments are based in 12 and some are, let's be honest, downright impractical to tune otherwise, what I like to do with some of these more ambient interpretations is to record each note of a chord individually. Additionally, if needed, this method allows me to retune some notes microtonally in post. Sometimes, depending on what instruments you're working with, this is really the only way to kind of build these chords. This can be tedious, for sure. But it gives me a significant amount of control of the production of the harmony. And it allows me to stitch together whatever sound I'm feeling at a given moment. I can scrapbook a neutral 7 chord together by using a septivox for the root, a kalimba for the neutral third, a bowed marimba for the 5th, and a lo-fi guitar sample for the 7th. It's kind of like a sort of musical pointillism. With traditional instrumentation, you expect consistency in linear movement. The violin will play one note and then move on to another note and then onto another note and so on and so forth, interacting with the ensemble around it as it continues to shape and evolve. With the scrapbooking method, the violin may just come in once and play a single note, capturing a moment in time and space before disappearing entirely, never to be heard from again. This is a scrapbook of sounds, moving from chapter to chapter, sound to sound, conveying a constellation of emotions through its densely woven pages. Andre 3000 is very intentional in his writing.
1, 2, 3, My baby don't mess around because she loves me so, and this I know for sure.
At its core, Hey Ya can be read as a commentary on modern relationships, a commentary that isn't just lyrical, but metrical. The story isn't just told in words, it's woven into the music itself.
But does she really wanna, but can't stand to see me walk out the door?
The narrator is in a committed relationship, yet he worries that the only reason his partner stays faithful is out of fear of losing him, not out of love. It's clear that whatever affection once existed between these two has faded long ago. Now they're holding onto the relationship not out of passion, but out of fear. Fear of being alone and a fear of change.
Don't try to fight the feeling, cause the thought alone is killing me right now.
This tension is accentuated in the music itself through meter. An extra 2 beats are inserted into the middle of each phrase, dragging out the rhythm as if the music itself was holding on to something that it should have already let go. These added beats set up a deceptive cadence. The 5 chord wants to resolve back to the 1, but it doesn't. Instead, it lingers on the major 6, deceptively diverting expectations and leaving the chord progression feeling unresolved, like an unspoken truth hanging in the air. The narrator and his partner sit in silence. They'll talk, but the words won't matter. The things they need to say are the things they won't. They'll continue like this, shrinking into themselves as the distance between them grows, prisoners of a life that they no longer recognize. Maybe the minor-major clash was more intentional than I initially thought. Maybe it speaks to the unspoken cracks in so many of our relationships.
Thank God for mom and dad for sticking two together, cause we don't know how.
The narrator reflects on how his parents endured as if endurance were the same as happiness. He ought to feel reassured. Instead, he feels guilty. They managed, so why can't he seem to? So the relationship continues, sterile and without warmth. They both sacrifice their own happiness just to keep the facade up. After all, it's not always easy to admit that we're just not happy here.
We're not happy here.
I think it goes just a little bit deeper than that, though.
Y'all don't wanna hear me, you just wanna dance.
The song itself is almost aggressively happy. The music video matches this upbeat energy to a T. You almost don't even register that the lyrics are about as far away from the thematic tone of the song as they can be. The lyrics, like the chords, clash, but we don't seem to be able to hear it. In the music video, the audience is cheering so loud over the entire song, they virtually drown out the band. No doubt a reference to when real-life crowds caused the Beatles to stop touring in 1966 for the exact same thing. At the time, Paul McCartney said that the band had felt like they just weren't being heard. Andre 3000 says,
Y'all don't wanna hear me, you just wanna dance.
And we can't hear Andre. The arrangement, the music, all ensures that we don't. We can't hear him over his alternating falsettos, not over his disjunctive phrasing, and not over Hey Ya's incredibly catchy beat. Or maybe we just don't want to hear him. Because that's the real point that Andre 3000 is making here. We, the audience, are guilty of doing the exact same thing as this couple. We're not listening. While this record is a masterfully crafted meta-commentary on song that, well, let's be honest, only Blues Traveler could fully appreciate, we thought it might be fun to take a slightly different approach. What would happen if we cut the noise, slowed things down, and gave Andre's words the space to breathe and be heard? What if two different chords staunchly opposed met in the middle? What if we had 31 notes?
My baby don't mess around because she loves me so, and this I know for sure. But does she really wanna, but can't stand to see me walk out the door? Don't try to fight the feeling, cause the thought alone is killing me right now. Thank God for mom and dad for sticking two together, cause we don't know hey.
huge thank you to all of my patrons now currently on screen. If you want to try out Heptatonic Mohajira yourself, but you don't want to spend a bunch of time retuning your synths or, God forbid, scrapbooking a million takes together just to do it, well, I've got a solution for you. I have digitized this tuning and a bunch of other tunings into drag and drop files that you can find on my Patreon. When you join our microtonalist tier, you'll get a bunch of extra content, like my lecture series, Microtonality for the Modern Musician, a bunch of exclusive videos on things like neutral harmony or the many sevenths of 31 Ito, micro drift modulation techniques, and much more. You'll also have access to the Microtonalist Manual, a comprehensive resource containing everything you'd ever need to know about making music in 31 Ito. Come study with me. I make it a point to make myself available to all of my patrons to answer questions, nerd out on music, and help foster a thriving community of microtonalists. We await you with open arms and, of course, a whole lot of notes.